Good morning, tubers. Meet the 2000 Yamaha Grizzly 600. Now the story on this thing, I always like to give a little bit of a story before we get started on it. A friend of mine bought it as a non-runner and it had a spark issue and it was blowing fuses. So I said, you know, he called me and I happened to be in the area, and I said, why don't I drop by with my portable CDI? We'll put it on there. We'll have this thing running in no time at all. So I went over there and I checked it out and I found some things I couldn't explain, and I'm going to show those to you. And he said, why don't you just bring it home and work on it? And I got it here and we had a real tough time loading it. It was very heavy on the truck and I was very concerned about reloading it and getting it back to him. So, you know, I had it for a period of time and I said, you know, I'm just not fixing this quick enough and it's sitting here, you know, what do you want for it? I'll buy it from you. And we came upon a price and I purchased it. I gave him enough money so he was able to get out of it. Just looking at the system, at this all-terrain vehicle, you realize a Grizzly 600 will not go cheap. Obviously it's a four-wheel drive automatic. It's in halfway decent shape. If I had to put a number on it, it's, you know, you could buy these for somewhere around $2,000, $2,500 by me, and you know, to help him get out of it and to make it work and everything else. I do have quite a bit of money tied up in this thing. I actually had to make payments on it. I couldn't give them all the money in one shot. It was more than twice what I normally pay for an all-terrain vehicle. But once again, it's at my house. I'm not bringing it back, right? I don't, it's bad karma to take things and not pay for them, eh? So anyway, here we have it, and I'll show you what I found. Let's take a few seconds to go on the backstory. My buddy Ryan was told that this thing was running fine. The grandkids had it out for a ride. I think there were two of them riding it, and they were, you know, fooling around or whatever, and they rolled it into a ditch, right? Douche. Into a ditch. And that's where the whole thing stopped. It didn't run. He bought it right after that. So, you know, he asked me to come take a look at it, and I looked up the wiring diagram, and this is the flywheel side of the engine. You see the recoil and all. And these wires come out, and they come from the stator, as in watch me charge the battery, to let me power the ignition system. And specifically, these two wires here, red and white, go to the pulse generator. So I hooked my meter up and I got an open circuit. Well, I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't make much sense to me, that you roll it on its side and you tell me it starts blowing fuses and the pulse generator goes out to launch. So the next thing I checked was the stator that powers the ignition system. So if one checks those two wires, and this once again is the coil that powers the stator coil that powers the CDI, it's the green one and the brown one, right? And I also have an open circuit. So now I'm scratching my head and I'm looking at it, right? Here's the wire here, right? I'm looking at the right side. This wire goes to the engine, so that's all correct. And I'm like, how the heck could all that be opened? Now I'm a little curious about the other stator coils, the ones that eventually charge the battery. So I check them and I get 1.2 ohms between resistance on each one of the coils. It's a three-phase system, so as you poke around between any two of the three, you get 1.2 ohms. So I'm like, all that is good. Now I'm kind of scratching my head and I'm thinking, why the heck would the stator and the pulse generator go out to lunch? So I went to eBay as always, and they sold this replacement stator with pulse generator, the whole shooting match. It was 29 bucks, free shipping with tax about 32. So with that, now I'm checking the red and white wire, which right, red and white goes to the pulse generator, and you guys could see I have 576 ohms. So I'm like, okay, I have an open circuit there. You know, no big surprise, right? Sometimes these blow out. What do I have for the stator coil? And by the way, this is outside the flywheel, so to speak, and this is inside the flywheel. So I'm trying to figure out how both would get damaged at the same time. Okay, now I'm hooked up to the green and brown wires, right? And you can see I'm getting 314 ohms. So everything on this connector is okay. If I put these over here, I see 1.2 ohms between each of them, right? And this is the three-phase that charges your battery. So I just have opens here. Now at this point, I have a decision to make, and I'm taking you guys along step by step, because you might be out there and you might find one of these and get a great deal on it and might be doing exactly the same stuff I am, so you got decisions to make all along, right? Well, theoretically, I should take all this stuff off and replace the stator. But just before I do that, what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to put some abrasion. I'm going to unwrap this, right? I'm going to take this cover off. I'm going to expose the wires, and I'm just going to take a look to see maybe they got jerked on real bad and they got damaged in here or something. So before I tear this whole thing apart, especially given that there's two problems, I just want to be sure that I'm not taking something apart that doesn't need to come apart. Right? One doesn't want to break more than one needs to break. And by not taking it apart, you can't break it. So anyway, let's wrap all these wires and see what we find. So they're partly loose, and I really don't see anything obvious. I'm going to cut this black covering. I'm going to just slice it, and let's see if there's anything going on underneath it. Particularly, it was clamped right here. That's normally where you expect to find the trouble. Maybe while they were pulling it out of the ditch, they grabbed the wire and did something to it. Well, you could see a meter reading, and I guess we didn't quite get a half a sandwich. Maybe we got the bread. And what we have here is the green wire and the brown wire. They go to the stator that powers the CDI system. So by doing a little abrasion on the wires so I could get to the conductor, I have continuity. That tells me that one of those is opened here at the connector. Now let's check the pulse generator. Unfortunately for the pulse generator, they're still both wide open. I think I'm going to try this exercise again a little further, a little closer to the flywheel, because I'm halfway there, right? If I could just get a pulse generator signal, I can put my my remote CDI on this thing and actually get it started, right? Clean up the carburetor and get it started. So I'm really trying not to take this engine apart. Once again, I'm a big believer in don't tear apart the engine if you don't have to. Okay, I moved all the way up by the flywheel and still no continuity on the pulse generator. Looks like I got to take it apart. Been avoiding it, but I have no choice. What I wanted to do is I just wanted to show you this additional troubleshooting. You might go, oh God, you wasted time. Personally, perhaps I did waste a little bit of my time. But for somebody out there who finds, oh, I just have a broken wire inside the plug, and I'm just going to tape up where I did the abrasion on the wire, or seal up where I did the abrasion on the wire, resplice the wire, whatever, and I'm going to fix the plug. I don't have to tear this whole thing apart. I don't have to replace my stator. What did I save you? I saved you $31 worth of stator, $32 worth of stator, and tearing the whole engine apart. So anyway, let's get started. Looks like I got to take the recoil off, and that's a bunch of 8mm. Then I need to take this shift gizmo off. Looks like I need to get the flywheel off of there. Hopefully I don't need a special puller for that. May as well get started. So taking off the recoil looks easy enough. Make sure you're going in the right direction. And 1, 2, 3, and number 4. There you go. Next we need to remove the starter basket, 17mm. And I'm just got to go in counterclockwise, and I have this impact set at the lowest setting, so let's see what happens. Just want to make sure I'm going the right way. I'm going to turn it up a setting. Try again, because the last thing one wants to do is break this. Well, it took the highest setting, but it got it out, so we're happy about that. By the way, for saving bolts, right, the more organized you are, the better. A lot of times these just wiggle out. There you go. There you are. Okay. I have to take off this top shifter, which looks like 10mm. There's only 2. There's 2 or there's 4, and a couple of them are gonna be hard to get to. Or actually, maybe I can leave that on and just pull the cover off. I'm gonna have to see. We'll find out in a minute. Okay, the side cover is off. I'm just taking a quick look here. See, first of all, the flywheel, right? I'm just making sure there's no damage inside the flywheel. And there's, on the bottom is the magnet that triggers the, well, it's long. The magnet that triggers the CDI feels pretty good. No sharp edges. That's what I'm feeling for, right? Any sharp edges? Quite honestly, I'd be donating my finger. Yeah, feels pretty good. Once again, no sharp edges. So, all right, let's take a look inside the cover. Okay, so here's the inside of the engine cover and a few things. The oil actually looks pretty nice, right? I'm really not seeing a load of metal in there, which is a very good thing. So that's one of the first things I was looking at. As a matter of fact, the whole inside of the engine looks nice and clean. Makes me very happy. Here's the pulse generator. Doesn't look like it was hit or damaged, right? I mean, it looks pretty normal. I'm not, oops, there it is. So I'm not sure why that went bad. Now, I can change just the pulse generator, but as I look at these coils, and let me show you them kind of up close, to me they look like they might have overheated at some point, and that insulation looks like it's melted a little bit. And you know, whenever you run into a situation like this, there's always a decision. Do I replace just what needs to be replaced, which is the pulse generator, right? That's all I need to change, right? We proved this coil's okay. and leave the OEM stuff, right? Or do I replace it all? Is the China clone as good as the OEM stuff with 2,000 miles on it, and the OEM stuff that is now, I don't know, 18 years old or so? I don't know. I think I'm just going to replace it all. That way my plugs are nice and new. Right, remember we have an open circuit here somewhere. So I think I'm just going to replace it all. But that is a decision one must think of. So, getting the stator and pulse generator out, not all that difficult. Phillips heads, 3 of them, you know, tap those right out. 2 Allen right here, 4 millimeters, 1 here, 1 there, 5 millimeters. So everything's loose, everything's ready to come out. Now I just gotta hope that the new one that I bought is exactly the same size. For anybody who's ever worked on big red machines, they realize that the early 250 ES had 1 flywheel and stator, and as you got later in 85, 86, and if you were lucky enough to have an 87, you had a different one. So it'd be very easy to say, oh, my stator's no good, go out and buy a new one, go to put it together with the old flywheel, and things would, the stator was too big for the flywheel. So it would go together, but then when you went to kick it over, it seemed to be seized, and that was because you just press fit the stator into the flywheel. So let's hope I don't have that problem with this. So both the old one has 15 charging coils and one coil to run the CDI, and I took the new one and I drew that right there with the marker, and then that one with the marker, and give or take 1.5 feet, they're the same size. One really finds out when you go to put this into the flywheel. The only thing you want to be careful of when you do put it in the flywheel, I recommend looping some wire or something through the hole so that you can kind of pull it back out again. It might, if it goes all the way in, you might not be able to get a grip on it, then you could damage it. So that's the only suggestion. Okay, it seems to fit in with enough space. Once again, the extra wire, and you could just pull it back out again. And as you can see, it didn't want to come out all that easily. So now it's just a matter of putting the whole thing back together again. Okay, tubers, this is where life becomes a box of cherries. It's time to just smash that cover right back on, right? No problem. Except the starter gear won't let it go back together again. So you say to yourself, oh, no big deal. I'll just take the starter out. That's where you just lied to yourself, because it is a big deal. First of all, to get the starter out, you got to take that cover off, because you can't get to the starter with that cover in the way. Once you take that cover off, and I mean the starter is right there, right? You can kind of see it. But to get the starter bolts out, you got to get this cover off. So you got to take out the inner fender, the cover, the starter, and then hopefully there are no more surprises. And even with the cover, right, I don't want to have to start monkeying with these connectors, because normally that doesn't go well. You know, when you have a machine that's the major part of 20 years old, you start messing with those connectors and you get into trouble. Anyway, I guess what I'm telling you guys, this is where this whole situation slows down to a crawl. The one good thing about getting one's face this much into it is now you can start kind of inspecting and looking at other things. While there was the cover was off, I gave the timing chain a quick check. It seems to be tight enough, so that's at least one less thing to worry about. Anyway, I'll just be here taking things apart. Enjoy your Sunday. So once I got the fenders off and cooling lines and covers over the drive shaft and the bolt off the starter, the terminal off the starter, I finally got the starter out. Once I got the starter out, I was able to seat this again, and now that this is seated again, the cover will go back on, and I just need to put it together. I fished around and made sure that there was nothing loose floating around. Everything, you know, I didn't drop any washers into it or anything like that, right? I checked the timing chain, right? You can just kind of get a little glimpse of it there. Made sure it's tight enough. Once again, it looks real clean, it looks real nice. Now it's just a matter of putting it all back together again. Okay, I put it together well enough to determine that the engine spins, it's not dragging or anything. And now what I want to do is verify the spark. And unfortunately, I have to pull the string at the same time the camera's going. So let's see if we can't manage this somehow. I think you would be able to see it spark. Well, let's hope so. I hear it crackling, and my problem is I can't see it and pull the string at the same time. So let's see how we do. So there we go. Hopefully you guys saw some spark. I hear it. I can't see it from my angle. I gotta wrap this project up for the day. Next time you see it, I'm gonna try to trickle some gas into the carburetor, get the electric starter on there, and try to turn it over. Other than having no spark, which turned out to be a pulse generator unit problem, and by the way, I stripped the wires back closer to the pulse generator, and this is opened. So maybe the pulse generator opened on its own. That's what this thing died of. And then when I unplugged the jack, I also hurt the connector such that the stator that powers the CDI also became an open circuit. I'm stretching here. I'm told that the last time this thing ran, it was driven into a ditch and flipped to its side. That doesn't make any sense to me why the pulse generator would fail at that point and the other thing would fail. If the wires were just yanked on, I would have seen that, and that does not appear to be the case. So, you know, a lot of times the story that we're told when we buy these things, I believe that my buddy Ryan was told exactly that story, but the kids who wrecked Grandpa's all-terrain vehicle, God knows what story they were telling, eh? Or maybe it wasn't running right and they were trying to tow it home and it got rolled into the ditch, or it stopped running and they were trying to drag it home and it got rolled into the ditch. I don't know. Before I put too much more time and money into this thing, I want to make sure it goes, right? I truly have no clue if it goes forward and reverse or anything else. The motor looked really nice and clean inside, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to fire it up and discover that it's got another issue. I would be a little surprised because, once again, the motor looked real nice and clean inside. But in this business, if you don't want to be surprised, don't play with all-terrain vehicles. Anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I tried to take people through step by step, including all the little surprises we run into. I started on this at about 9 a.m. this morning, and it's pushing about 3 o'clock. I didn't stop for lunch, so I've been working on it straight through. So I got about 6 hours in. I'm occasionally asked how long it takes me to do things. Between now and actually starting this thing, I need to clean up the carburetor. I'll probably have 7 or 8 hours into it, by the time it's ready to start, and by the time it's rideable, you know, the gas tank's cleaned up, though I think the gas tank's okay, but by the time I get the carburetor squared away, get the line run from the Grizzly tank to it, get it ready to ride and all, I'll probably have 8 hours. And by the time it's done, I put all the shields back on and all, 10, 12 hours. So if this were shop time, what would that be? Somewhere between $600 and $1,200 plus parts. It probably, you know, this would have been, it could have been $1,000 repair, eh? Anyhow, I want to thank everybody for dropping by to watch and comment and subscribe. Please remember, feet down, heads up, and get out and enjoy each and every day. Bye now.